I've got to say this. Even those people who are telling you that it's not compulsory to tithe are not being entirely truthful. They're still economical with the truth. If you go to the book of Colossians chapter 2 from verse 14, the Bible is very clear. The entire indebtedness was nailed to the cross with Jesus. You don't owe anything. Now, if you go to the book of Galatians chapter 3 verse 10, it breaks it down. Galatians 3:10 says, if you obey the law, you put yourself under a curse. Because if you want to obey the law, you've got to obey the entire law. Tithing is the law. They try to swing it through Melchizedek. It doesn't go. Melchizedek received tithe in Genesis 14 from Abraham at a time when Abraham had not even established his covenant with God. His covenant was not established till 17. When he was about to have Isaac. He had already had Ishmael. He hadn't had Isaac when God changed his name to Abraham. As at the time he gave tithe to Melchizedek, he was still Abram. So he didn't even have a covenant with God. Now, the only person who gave tithe before the law was Jacob. Jacob put up a pillar and said, God, if I can go and come successfully and I'm successful, I'll give you a tenth. Now, Jacob did not give his tenth to Melchizedek. At least there's no biblical support for that. And there were no priests in those days. The priesthood didn't start until Moses and Aaron and, the Levites. So how did he give the tenth to God? It was either one of two things. He probably gave to the poor, which then was not established as a doctrine. At least clearly with the Bible, we can't establish it. So the most likely thing he did was give a burnt offering. So those trying to use Jacob to establish tithing are more or less leaning on burnt offerings. That's if you want to say tithing came before the law. But under the law, anything that's under the law, if you practice it and do not practice the whole law, you're exposing yourself to the curse. Let me give you examples of a curse. If a woman who's on her period sits on that chair you're sitting on and she gets up and you sit on it, you are unclean. You are not allowed to cut the hair on the sides of your head. You can't cut the hair here or trim your beard. It's there in Leviticus 19:27. That's why you see the Jewish people, monks, and they have hair here. They don't joke with it. Yeah. Your daddy Geos are clean shaven. They're breaking the law.
But they tell you they're no longer under the Mosaic law.
They are no longer under the Mosaic law, and tithing is from where? It's from the Mosaic law. No, you can't swing it under Abraham. You can't swing it under... You see, Jesus is our foundation. He is the pillar upon which Christianity is established. He never collected tithe. Jesus said, Peter, you are the rock upon which I build my church. Peter was the first church. Peter never collected tithe. None of the disciples ever collected tithe. They were our first pastors, our first daddy Geos. They never collected tithe. So where is this doctrine coming from? It's coming from some greedy elements who are trying to bring in finances into the church. Initially, it must have been for a good cause. Maybe they didn't have enough money to fund the propagating of the gospel. But hello, there's a $40 million private jet parked in Lagos here among this, and you say you don't have to sell the private jet and fund the gospel. I preach my gospel on my 3 phones, on my data in my house, from my bedroom. I just prop a pillow behind me and sit down and I preach the word of God. I have 8,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, Daddy Freeze on YouTube, Daddy Freeze Teaches, youtube.com/Daddy Freeze Teaches. It's right there. I have a number on Twitter. You don't need a private jet. I can fund my preaching on my salary.
Yeah, that comes to our next question.
So I want to also finish just real quick.
Let me just quickly take
Okay.
that part because a lot of people will also want